Ian Hughes, the chair of the Animation and Games Specialist Group, is going to give us his presentation. Thank you, Ian.
Thank you. I'm not quite sure where my video's gone. I can only see you, Mark. Oh, there I am. Sorry, good. So, hi everyone, and welcome to those of you who are here live, and also to the people who are going to watch this at some later date. So, by the time you watch this, it'll probably be all out of date, like tomorrow, because this is a very fast-moving thing that we're talking about here. So, what I'm going to have a bit of a riff about is generative AI and metaverse, and as I said there, what a powerful combination that is. And just have to say that you know, I mean, he's known as the Predator online. You can find me all over the place on there, and if you need to contact me on LinkedIn or Twitter or wherever. But the opinions in this are all mine. This is nothing to do with the company I work for currently. Even if some of the things we do are in this space, this is purely my own work. So got that disclaimer out of the way. So let's move on. So what are we going to talk about? So going to try and merge, let you see where I think metaverse and generative AI kind of cross, and where all this stuff may be going, and obviously clear up some metaverse misconceptions. And there's some various elephants in the room that we probably need to get rid of, or at least shoo or make a little bit smaller, and give you some examples of current generative AI and where that fits. Because again, not everyone maybe come across all this stuff because it's a buzzword, but there's things to break down and just say where it's gone, that kind of evolution, and then kind of smash the two together and see where all this stuff is heading. And just as just to let you know who I am and where I am. So I'm called the Predator online. That's my handle. I'm still called Ian Hughes. There's no pretending I'm anything else. I've been online and working online for decades now, and quite often engage in virtual worlds and things that we may or may not call metaverse. I train and teach in a martial art called Choi Kwang Do, so I don't just do tech, even though it might seem like it is. I'm an honorary doctor of technology from Solent University, and I presented tech on Cool Stuff Collective for 3 series back in 2010 on Saturday morning TV, which was talking about all this kind of stuff, the same sort of stuff that I talk here and that I talk to C-level execs about. But that was for 7 to 11-year-olds, about all the wonderful world of tech out there. And I'm also an author, and this is I have to do an advert for this. So I wrote a couple of science fiction novels. There's a third one in here somewhere in my brain, but called Reconfigure, and the other one called Context. That I find the written word is still very important. So for all the tech in the world, being able to tell stories and find ways to share stories, whether it's through written word, whether it's through pictures or through games or film or whatever, is intriguing to me. And so all the stuff in these books is about technology, sort of this afternoon. So some of it still hasn't got out of date. When I wrote it a few years ago, and it still hasn't got out of date, but I'd say it's still set this afternoon. Bit more about that a little bit later on, but feel free to go and enjoy these particular adventures. So the metaverse landscape. So here we are to clear up some of the misconceptions, possibly, or just at least so we're all on the same page. When people hear metaverse, there are lots of people that have come to the word because Facebook renamed itself to Meta, and Mark Zuckerberg did all his presentations about it and stuff. Metaverse has been around for a long while, as I'll show you in a minute, but it's not one platform or one thing, and it's not just about avatars, and it's not just about social media. It's wired into how business and industrial things work as well. It's got everything from it's about how we communicate online, how we interact online. It's about our own digital evolution, particularly into spatial and real-time applications. Everything we're doing here, yes, it's all digital, and yes, we're all remote, but we're not all together. The sense of presence isn't there. You are listening to me, but I can't really see you. I don't know where you are. This isn't the pinnacle of human communication online, and it's there are ways to do things today that could make it feel like we were more in the same place and we had a more memorable engagement with one another that fitted more with how our brains work, because we're spatial beings. So when you hear metaverse, don't just think, oh, it's funny little avatars, or don't think, oh, it's all the weird stuff with flying unicorns. It's also offices, and it's also factories, and it's also instrumentation in those factories and efficiencies and things like that. So there's a whole, it's everything. Any type of digital interaction could potentially drop into the world of the metaverse, and it's not one platform, not one provider doing one thing, but it's also everything all at the same time, which is a nice sweeping complicated statement, obviously, but let's go with that. But I'd like you to come with me back into a little bit down the time tunnel here. So we're going to wander down this time tunnel back to a time before iPhones and just as Twitter was being born. And it sounds a long while, we've had iPhones for ages, it seems, but I want to go back to 2006 just to set tone for the sort of things that are possible in virtual environments that we tend to now call metaverse things. And back in 2006, I was IBM's metaverse evangelist. And because that's where I worked, and I worked in IBM Hursley with a bunch of colleagues, and we all got into being able to interact with one another in these 3D spaces. And in this case, it was in the space called in Second Life. And you may have heard in Second Life, it's still there, it's not gone away. Second Life started in 2003, we got into it in 2006, so it'd already been going a long while. And what you see here is a picture of, there's me, it's quite blurry because it's an old picture, way before we had fancy graphics cards and things. But there's me, I'm ePredator on there. We had, so Algernon Spackler's on there, that's his Second Life name, my office mate, and my other office mate is here in Seattle. But this was one evening. So we're still working with one another, but we're at home. And we were lucky enough to have laptops and internet connections and stuff like that. Lots of people were still chained to a desk and all those kind of things. But so we were busy doing this stuff, and we were building things with one another. So whilst this just looks like a mismatch of all sorts of weird shapes and things, those pyramids that you see there are they've actually got code in them, because we're all programmers. And this is BCS after all, but we were programmers at the time. And so we were building a publish subscribe demonstration like MQTT is off in the IoT world, because that had been PubSub, MQTT had been invented by our colleague Andy Stanford Clark, co-invented one weekend when he popped into the office and say, look at this clever thing. And now MQTT is all over IoT, and lots of people are using it for all sorts of things. But we were building a replica of that in this virtual environment. So whilst we've got all this mess and dominoes that fall over and funny video feeds and a trampoline there, we were actually collaborating on code, and we could talk to one another or type to one another or make things in front of one another. And so there was an element of I remember this conversation because it happened somewhere. And so this is an important part of the whole metaverse movement, if you like. And they're shared virtual spaces, and it's user generated content. I've highlighted user generated content now because that's the important part. This isn't about a high-end AAA gaming studio making a load of stuff to entertain us. This is about us building things to either entertain ourselves or to talk to one another or to engage and just have, in this case, we're having fun, but we're being geeks and we're writing code. But obviously, 2003, when that got made, but Snow Crash, Neil Stephenson coined the metaverse word back in 92, I think, in his novel Snow Crash. So metaverse, as again said before, is not something that just arrived because Mr. Zuckerberg decided to rename his company Meta. But this is 3D objects and code together, and it's all handcrafted. And that's important to know. Also, we've got a big logo on the back there, raising the 8-bar. That was pointing to our blog. So we ran this 8bar.com unofficial IBM emerging tech blog that we mainly ended up talking about these virtual worlds back in 2006. And again, so that was before people were tweeting and before people were really buying things. I mean, we were buying things, but before people were using Amazon that much, they weren't doing grocery shopping, people weren't doing banking. This was all before its time, really. And that kind of explains some of the reason we had this big bubble, and then everyone got onto what social media was and got onto kind of text socializing and sharing rather than this stuff. But we're kind of back. So these kind of things are on the way back. But also in 2006, this kind of evolved. That one of the things I did was I worked on the Wimbledon Championships on our web, the IBM sponsored kind of web property that we had for there, and I worked on that for a decade. And each year, one of my jobs was to bring something interesting to show our clients and something they hadn't seen before. And so in 2006, it was let's show them this virtual environment. And so I built a rough version of a tennis court, as you can see there, but particularly was bringing in data from the outside world. So I was bringing in Hawkeye data, and this is before Hawkeye was used as much as it is now. Again, this is, pre-iPhone, pre-Twitter, pre-Hawkeye line decisions, but at least gave me the trajectory of a ball from the outside world. And this was to prove that whilst it was called Second Life, Metaverse doesn't have to be about disappearing off and being somewhere else. This is effectively a very light digital twin of Wimbledon. And you hear the words digital twin all over the place now, but that was coined for the Apollo missions in the 60s. So that's not a new word either. But the notion of like having a factory instrumented and engaged within in one of these environments is as valid as I said, the more fanciful kind of things that we had, like I showed you that flying unicorn. And we had things like lots of community gatherings and expressive avatars and stuff like that. It was a very vibrant time, and all of us that were engaged with that then are still friends and still know one another. And we were working remotely way before any of this COVID stuff made everyone do it, because that little picture down the bottom left, there's people all over the world just in that picture. And then just a little bit of as this evolved in 2007, another thread to pull at here. A company called Rivers Run Red were running a project for Reebok. So this is product placement of trainers. So they're Reebok trainers that you see there in that kind of left-hand picture there. And you went to a booth and you made custom trainers. So you said what color you wanted and where. And for a while, that was a little bit of a fashion trend, that people would have lots of different Reebok trainers. And if you didn't have Reebok trainers, you weren't in the gang kind of thing. And I also, at that time, had put my physical leather jacket that I wore everywhere. So when I went to conferences and stuff, I had this stripes on my leather jacket, and people saw that and realized it was me. So even though they'd seen various avatars and my Predator character, they knew it was me because I had that jacket on. So there was a bit of identity in there. And we also had a virtual t-shirt for our blog for 8bar. So we had these t-shirts, but on the right there, I also managed to get my avatar 3D printed. So again, back in 2007, 3D printing is not necessarily everywhere, but it's slightly better known now. And so that has turned a bunch of stuff that was digital into something that's now physical. So I now have my leather jacket, and I have my t-shirt, and I have my Reeboks on that statue. And the jacket is now a physical version of a thing that was originally physical in the first place, because it was my full-size jacket that I made virtual, and now is stuck on the avatar and then printed out. So there's this whole loop of real to digital and real. And I say that because people say, oh, virtual isn't real. Virtual reality and stuff and virtual worlds are not real. They are as real as anything else. We experience them, we feel them. It's slightly different senses we might be hitting. We might be wearing VR headsets. We might have haptics. We might have AR. We might be looking at a flat screen, but it's still all real. So I tried to make different distinction and say digital and physical, but people understand real, so we kind of throw that in sometimes. And then just finally on this history trip, sort of 2008, 2009, all the projects evolved. So Wimbledon turned into a much bigger event. We were doing Oz Open and French Open as well. It was sort of properly built and kind of properly sponsored, I suppose. But eventually I left IBM just to go and do my own thing. Started my company Feeding Edge and started doing things like exploring other business opportunities and building training hospitals and stuff like that, but ended up on virtual chat shows. So there you see my Predator character wearing my Feeding Edge t-shirt for my company and my leather jacket, having a chat about economics on the Metanomics show, which would now be a podcast, but that was a TV show done in a virtual world. So this has all the stuff you see today has all been done before. That's not to say that they shouldn't keep doing it, but it's not new. And we've all learned stuff from these various things, but it's all incredibly memorable and much more memorable than the past 2 or 3 years of Zoom and Teams calls. It's like I have been to these places and hung out with these people and talked to them properly. And that's an important thing to bear in mind about the metaverse. But of course, now there were a few things like that around. Second Life was there, but now we are dealing with thousands of virtual environments in all sorts of different ways. That online gaming is now obviously huge. So we've got things like Fortnite, and Fortnite Epic is spinning out Fortnite Creative, so people can do user-generated content, or putting brands into the Fortnite game, so people can run around in branded clothing and things like that while they shoot one another. Roblox is obviously, if you haven't heard of Roblox, use Roblox. Huge company. I guess it is a unicorn now, sort of $1 billion company. Huge amount of R&D going in, huge amount of investment. People build entire games and experiences in Roblox, and kind of brands go in there and do things, but there's also lots of individual startups and things building interesting experiences. VR chat equally is kind of more like Second Life. It's a slightly more expressive, more unusual place. And then there's kind of the businessy things like Horizon Workrooms. Microsoft I didn't even put on here, so Teams and Mesh is doing some virtual environment stuff for meetings that's just going to be built into Teams. And then NVIDIA Omniverse, which is the industrial side of things. That's the heavy duty engineering things. So there's all these things going on. Lots more opportunities. But where there's user generated content, that obviously gets a bit more tricky, because who's going to make all that stuff? But we'll all the virtual stuff, all the digital stuff, where's all that? How's all this stuff going to get populated? Because it's not just going to be the AAA games companies. And that's where we can kind of switch tack now a little bit into having harped on about metaverse and the history. And I remember when the metaverse was, we've got the generative AI landscape. Now, Gen AI, everyone is buzzed about AI. We've got, obviously, there's the thing going on at Bletchley Park at the moment, like on the AI World Summit, and President of the United States kind of doing mandates to say what we should and shouldn't do about AI. Everyone is buzzed about it. Now, you may or may not have used it, you may or may not have engaged with it, but it's going to touch your lives in some way if it hasn't already. But just again to set the scene, we've got stuff that is dealing with primarily with words, with documents, or with poems, or with emails, or with understanding legal documents or medical documents or science papers, or just creating fanciful statements and weird comedy scripts and things like that. And all that's being done with things like Chat-GPT and Bard. And they tend to be called large language models. They're not all large language, but LLMs is the other sort of sub buzzword. And these things have got huge amount of investment and are everywhere. So Chat-GPT is being kind of bolted into Bing, into Microsoft search engine. So when you search for something, if it can't find a web page, it'll write you an answer. Equally, there's apps for Chat-GPT, and you can talk to it. You can give it images and say, what's this? And you can have a conversation. They're conversational things, and they're way past what happens with, I need to be careful if I say Alexa, because I've got one in the room. No, it didn't go off. and Siri got that on there, way past what those things do, because both Alexa and Siri are very narrow responding things, and you don't have a conversation. They can't remember what the last thing you said was typically, but these Gen AI things, these large language models, remember context. You can ask it a question and a follow-up question without rephrasing the entire question again. All very clever. There's also then the other things that are about generating pictures from text prompts, or from, and I've spelled stable wrong, but Stable Diffusion. I tapped that in just before we started. Anyway, imagine there's an L in there. This obviously wasn't done by an AI. There's Midjourney, DALL-E, Stable Diffusion, many other things, some apps on phones and things. But basically, you type a little bit of text, and a lot of text if you want, and you get a picture or a set of pictures that it will generate for you. And then there's a bunch of stuff that is trying to do video. So it's the next stage on from those pictures. And then there's a whole load of things which we talk about 3D objects, animations, places, and characters. But they're all there, either replacing or adding to our brain power. And so I'll start with the words thing, just as I think anytime anyone talks about Chat-GPT, they have to use Chat-GPT in some way. So I've seen lots of keynotes where the keynote gets, the intro of the keynote about Chat-GPT is written by Chat-GPT. I just asked it, what's large language models, so I don't have to write the definition again. But I asked it, and I'm in no way suggesting that you as an audience don't pull this information in at intricate detail. But I said, can you tell me for a 5-year-old and for a 20-year-old? So at the same time, it's produced these 2 paragraphs. And actually, I prefer the 5-year-old one. That's a bit more like talking to C-level execs, I'd suggest. So it's your favorite toy box filled with millions of little pieces, and it's there to tell stories and answer questions. So it sounds very benevolent and lovely. The bigger thing down the bottom there is all about the deep learning and the structure and neural networks and inspired by our brains and all that sort of stuff. But so that's OpenAI's ChatGPT telling me what it is. Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Good. I've managed to switch microphones. Oh no, there we are. It's back again. There we are. That's technology for you, isn't it? So
Right, thank you.
I had to speak into my VR headset then because it was telling me it had switched to that. So good. Yes, lost me there for a few seconds. Anyway, so large language models are it's worth going and experimenting and seeing what they do. Go on to Bing or go on to ChatGPT, see what they are. But in the area of games and of, this is where it starts to merge a little bit with metaverse and with experiences that we want to have. Companies like InWorld here have built a front end for any large language model to let you structure the backstory of a character, to ask that large language model to pretend to be that character. So they're particularly good at, you can say, you know, pretend you're the world expert in such and such, and then it will only answer like that, or pretend you're a Victorian and answer in Victorian language, or speak in Old English or something like that. But so InWorld has created this SDK that you can then frame and create your own characters. And there's some stuff they've already provided. So I just happened to use their Mad Hatter one, and the Mad Hatter, you know, you have this conversation with it, and it tries to give you a little bit of emotion to it as well. So it's telling you a little bit of the characterization about what he's doing. You know, I told him my name and then it remembered it. So that's that sort of chain of conversation is the sort of thing that happens that makes non-player characters, NPCs, in environments much more engaging, because they are responding in the right style. It's not all scripted. It's be a bit like this and act like this. And so this is the first stage, if you like, of merging. If you imagine you're in a metaverse and you're talking to something, or in a game and you're talking to something, wherever you are, that it's got some more expressive personality and is being a bit clever, and you can ask it all sorts of questions and it knows what's been going on in the world you're in and all that kind of stuff, just like a person, but acting. So there's a whole bunch of companies looking at doing stuff like this, and there's another one I'll show you in a minute. But then there's also Meta doing this as well. Now, having said it's not all about Meta, I thought I'd better mention them, because otherwise they'll get annoyed, won't they? And recently at their big conference, they unveiled these. They're currently in the US, but these new AI characters. So that what they've done is pay license fees to people like Tom Brady and Snoop Dogg and whoever the rest of all those American characters are, and use their likeness and a little bit of their sass or their brand or whatever, or how they might talk, to create an AI that you have a chat with and have a conversation with. So Snoop Dogg there is the dungeon master. So you play D&D with him, and he sets the scene and talks to you about there's a door to the north and you open it and go in, like an old-fashioned text adventure, but it's adjusting to what you want and what you're asking about and how you're feeling, but kind of, you know, joking about, because it's a bit in the style of Snoop Dogg. You know, Tom Brady is there as Brew, so as a, you know, the top paid American football player from a long while ago, well, not that long ago, but recently retired, you know, multi Super Bowl winner quarterback, but he's a confident sports debater. So it's not actually Tom Brady. They're just using his likeness, but obviously they've asked him to do it. And so these are going to just be in our phones and in our apps, and there'll be things that they've gone for this photorealistic thing to try and make it a little bit more real. But it's the same thing as the in-world thing that I just showed, just a slightly different AI underneath. And then there's the other bit. So that was kind of text, if you like. So even if they're talking, it's still text. And they're just photos that are sort of slightly animated. So I don't think they're not that clever visually, but it's the underlying thing that's of interest there. but photos and pictures. All of us know how to pick up a pencil and try and draw a picture. Not all of us are painters. Not all of us are artists. But things like Midjourney and DALL-E and Stable Diffusion, all these other things. Midjourney, back in June 22, there on the left-hand side, I was tinkering about with Midjourney when I saw that it did this stuff, and I was just doing some basic prompts, and I was asking things like at the top there, I wanted Jimi Hendrix on a snowboard, and it decided to be psychedelic about the colors of the picture. I didn't say anything else other than Jimi Hendrix on the snowboard, and it's in the style of that time. I said Johnny Rotten on a paddleboard. I got obsessed with boards and got the thing on the left in the middle there, and so they were interesting pictures, and playing with it and asking it questions and seeing what it could do was interesting. But in the course of a year, the potential to do many more styles and much more photorealistic stuff, if you want to do photorealistic and still do cartoony. But you can see the stuff on the right there from August, or around August time. Right at the bottom, we've got John Wick talking to a cat. I mean, that is Keanu Reeves, or would appear to be. We've got Christopher Walken on a skateboard. Again, board theme. My favourite is the right-hand side three penguins thing through a fisheye lens, which just looks like a Beastie Boy rap video. And the quality of this stuff has got incredible. but it comes down to how you experiment a bit with the prompts. So it's how you describe what you would like, and you get some accidental interesting things happen, but also having seen something that inspires you to maybe change the prompt and ask for something a little bit different or expand on something. So they're actually quite good brain tools, and it's quite meditative to go through these things, and you get on a subject, and it is creative. It's not art in the traditional art sense, because you're not putting pen to paper and you're not only expressing that, but you are trying to get a tool to do something. And I think that's an interesting balance. And again, this stuff is now entering our search engines. So if you ask for a picture of something and the search engine can't find the picture, it can generate something along the lines of what you've asked. And so that's, again, completely changing the kind of the nature of clip art, or how we build presentations, or how you do skill reports, or any of these things. And it's an intriguing time. And it doesn't, I don't think it doesn't replace photography or drawing or painting or any of that stuff, because they are still creative human endeavors. But this is yet another one, and it's a tool that's emerging. But again, that's that visual. So we've had words and we've had 2D flat visual. And this stuff is also now in Photoshop. So Photoshop is famous for being able to mess around with photos and do stuff. And if you're an artist and you do that stuff, there's some really clever stuff that has been able to be done with Photoshop for years. But here, there's a spot the difference game here. So on the left is a picture of my son and I at a gig in a virtual world. I was in VR, he was on a regular screen, but we were both at this Fatboy Slim gig in the middle of COVID. And so we're all the people you see there, all our avatars, we're all dancing, we're all chatting, we're all singing to Fatboy Slim. He's come as a shark. I've got my green hair and kind of goth look and guitar thing going on. And I just dropped this into Photoshop, and the one in the middle, round about just to the left of the gold guy, I drew a little circle and I just typed in dancing robot. That's all I typed, and it created a new layer, put this thing in, and it decided to make something that was similar in color and tone to the thing that was next to it. So I've ended up with a tiny little gold robot next to the big gold robot. And that was, again, I was only just starting that journey, but that thing was exactly what I wanted. I thought, that's cool, I like that. And then over on the right, it was another choice for the robot, for a dancing robot. And this time it decided to completely get rid of that gold robot and put something else completely different in. I mean, it's even got rid of Fatboy Slim in the background and several of the other people dancing, and created this other dancing thing, including a shadow. But it's all in context. And I think if you saw any of those pictures, you probably wouldn't know which one was the real one if I hadn't explained that. And again, we're in 2D, it's generative fill, it happened in seconds, but obviously this stuff could get faster and will get faster. But it's well worth, if you've got Photoshop, it's well worth having a tinker around with that. But moving on, we're still in 2D here, but I took the first scene from my book, from Reconfigure, which is actually also the scene halfway through the book, not to spoil the plot, but it's an adventure thing going on. And Roisin here, my lead character, I asked Midjourney to generate a picture based on that scene. It was quite rudimentary. I sort of said the kind of look I wanted. It wasn't a huge, great long prompt, but it was important. It was a Mac, so because she has a Mac, and she's in the forest and she's trying to shut everything down because she's being chased. It's quite a tense moment, but she's trying to get off the grid, but she has to shut a load of stuff down because it's a tech adventure. And so it generated this wonderful picture on the left, and I thought, wow, that's awesome. That's almost what I had in my head when I wrote it. But then I took that picture and I put it onto a website called Runway, so runway.ml, which is one of the companies that's trying to help you do generative video. And so they do image to video. And so on the right here, all I did was take that picture, and this was the free version, so it generates a very short amount because it uses a lot of processing power, but I dropped it in and said, do something with this. I didn't even say to that, I just dropped it in. There was no text prompt. I didn't describe or direct anything that I wanted to happen. And it just did this. So it animated it. It moved that character. Now it's a bit blurry. It's got that typical kind of dreamy thing that goes on at the moment with these AI videos. But even things like a gentle move of the camera, it's not just flicking the eyes or flicking the hair or any of that stuff. It's actually understood that's a person sat at a computer. And the first time I saw this and she turned it on, and the video was just a frame or two long, but actually turning and looking at me was spooky. Now, I don't think I don't want this to replace people making movies and the art of that. But me as an author trying to find a way to represent my stuff in a different way, to be able to take my words and take my story and start to generate a film from it is really intriguing. And it's going to take a long while to do if it only does a few at a time. But if you're going to animate something by hand, you spend ages drawing each frame and stuff like that. So this was 6 months ago. So this stuff's got way better already and way longer. So I would look at, and there's multiple companies doing this sort of thing. And obviously, once it understands if it does understand what's in that, then you can act as a director and you can say, and then I want them to shut the computer down and run away, or I want you to look scared, or any of those things. That stuff's going to start to happen. So for kind of previs or trying to understand what something is or telling a little bit of a story, this is going to be intriguing. But I said, we're still in 2D here. So for the metaverse and all these virtual places, we've got these. It's much, much more complicated to create stuff for those environments. And I don't know if any of you have done or you've tried, but there's so many things to do. And I'm just going to run through some of the complicated things you have to go through to make 3D objects that move. And, this is, and then how AI is going to kind of assist in that, or is already assisting in that. So start with modeling. So this is Blender. Blender's an open source 3D modeling application. So think Photoshop, but for 3D things, for depth and space. So Photoshop does flat things. It does a little bit of 3D, but it does flat things. So it's about collages and sticking things together and changing the color of things and airbrushing, models and things like that. Blender is about, and all the applications like it, is about sculpting and about taking this mathematical concept. In this case, you start with a cube. You don't have to start with a cube, but it's a cube. And if I was running this live, I'd spin round and you could see it from all different angles because it's actually represented in a 3D space. Not with 3D glasses, not with VR or anything, but it's got X, Y, and Z coordinates around it. And you have to think spatially to build with that. You can't just, if you're going to change that cube in any way, you have to think, well, what does it look like from all those directions? You can't just sketch flat things like you do when you do a picture. So it's more like sculpture. It's more like taking a chisel to a block of wood or a block of stone and doing something with it, which is very, very different from drawing a picture or taking a photo of something flat. And there's an example here of and this is in the Blender kind of assistant stuff, and this is a scene by Lopo Isaac Fernandez. So their credits are there, but at the top there, they're trying to show how you can take a lot elongated thing and square thing and kind of turn it into this nice swirly movement of hair for this violinist. And it's you know, there's a few more things that happen than just those arrows, but it's just kind of demonstrating that you can use some of those tools to manipulate and mash that thing around. And there's a huge number of tools in there for pushing and prodding and dragging and adding and stuff, because it's sculpting. But the end result, you can see there at the bottom, this violinist, so intricate eyelashes and strings on the bow, and as well as the swirl of the hair. But she's completely made up of, as you can see, hopefully see there, lots of slightly angled squares, which are basically two triangles stuck together, but triangles and squares that are forming that surface. And the more of those that you have, the smoother it looks. And this thing can be viewed from any angle. As I said, so you have to do the back and the front and the side and the top. You can't just, you know, do that. But I mean, this was trying to show modeling. But as you can see, there's no color and texture to that yet. That is still a great piece of work and a great piece of art, but it's static and grey. To color things in 3D in these environments, you have to do what's called UV mapping. And UV refers to the fact that it's sort of XY coordinates, because you've used X, Y, and Z on the 3D model, then you use U and V on this this pattern, if you like, on the left. So any object then has to be unwrapped into a flat surface so that it can then be painted on and then wrapped back on that surface. So it's a mathematical unwrapping that the tools kind of try and help you do it. And here is just a cube, and you can see just the three sides of the cube that have been just blasted. This is just an example of how it works. But if you can imagine a really complicated thing that you're trying to paint and texture, if you've ever done desktop wargaming or anything, those tiny little figures, and people spend hours and hours painting them. Just even in the physical world, it's difficult. In the digital world, it's just takes it to another level, because it's much harder to do. And as I said, a cube is simple. There are other things that help you say, well, I'd like it made of a particular material, or I'd like this bit to be shiny, or this bit to be see-through, or this bit to be made of rubber and bouncy, and all the kind of physical properties. But content, textures, and materials is yet another element to this. And in the games industry, there's people that specialize in doing texturing, and there's people that specialize in doing modeling. There are people who do both, but it's a whole level of skill that you need to do this stuff. It's all maths under the covers, but you've got these tools to get you through it. Now, even if you do texture this, and this is from PowerPoint's 3D models that you can just drop in. I use them a lot. Even if you have like this T-Rex model in 3D rendered, so you've got all the teeth, you've done all the texturings, you've got all the stripes on it, it's still just a lump of non-moving maths and pixels. It doesn't do anything apart from you change the camera angle. If you want it to move, or you want that structure to change, you have to do what's called rigging, which is to give it a mathematical skeleton inside it, which is itself quite complicated, and again another art form. So inside you associate parts of that model to an armature and to joints, and you can see there in the feet at the bottom there are three tiny little prongs for each of the toes, and it goes up to the sort of ankle and the knee. The claws at the front got two little prongs. The head has got lots of lines going through it for the mouth and the tongue and things like that. But all that has to be specified in some way, and they've all got various limits to those things. So unless the machines don't know, a general animation machine doesn't know what a T-Rex looks like. Humans is a bit easier. There's standard rigs for it, but anything that's weird and wonderful, it doesn't know, and you have to build it. And when you have these joints, some of them can move further than others. So for instance, if you imagine our elbows only move a certain amount, hopefully. Some people are a bit more double jointed, but that's all you can do with it. But then our joints, or any joint that you do, if I put my hand up like that, it's also moving lots of other joints. It's not just one tiny joint moving. So all these relationships and what one weights and pulls the other one all get created for every single character you see, every single thing, not just organic characters. It's the same for cars and for clocks and for well, motorbikes, anything, whatever, guns, bullets, the whole thing. Anything that's going to be animated needs this kind of rigging. So again, huge, great, complicated thing to do. And then having done that, if you then actually want it to move, you have to apply transformations to those skeletons to give it animation. So it's saying, I want you to do this, 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 and this to move this, this, and this, and then click to play. But obviously you have to mix some of those animations together, and there's ways to blend those animations so that this T-Rex opens his mouth, and whilst it's still running, it doesn't stop and only open its mouth. It's blending those together. The bird is flying in and say through a door, so the door has got an animation armature, but it's very basic. The clock is going round as well when it needs to, but again, it's basic, but it's all rigged in the same way. And so then you've got all that, and then it's where does it fit, and where do you put the camera, how do you look at this stuff, because there I've got the same dinosaur from 2 different views, 2 different camera views, all that, all incredibly difficult to do. Fun if you like that sort of thing, but difficult. Now, it's still an art, and to do it really, really well is going to take people, and AI isn't going to completely replace people, but there's a company, and there are several of these that have appeared, so this isn't just me recommending this single company here, but Masterpiece X. I recorded this about 6 months ago when I first bumped into Sing. This is just off their website. So what they're doing is using generative AI to create the character shape, to texture that shape based on what you ask, and then to apply a set of animations or rigging, and then a set of animations to that based on what you say. So all that stuff I just showed you is now these 2 sentences. Blonde Viking with a beard, generate. So it creates T-shaped blonde Viking with a beard. How does character move? Walk and twirl. It's now generated as a 3D character, walking and twirling. So that thing is now something that people can download and drop into a game or environment or metaverse thing or virtual world or whatever, because it's all there, and it's all just been generated. And this was so this is about 6 months ago when I first saw this, and as in the course of doing this, whilst I was putting this presentation together, they've gone sort of live. It's still beta, but you can see you can sign in. There's credits because you have to pay for the processing, and there's some free stuff, but it's a bunch of things that people have created. And so I thought I'd just see if it worked. So I asked it to create a cyberpunk geek pop art and intricate. I don't know whether it's actually if you say it was that, and then I asked it, I can't even remember what gestures I asked it to do, but it did something suitably weird for me. And so now this thing in minutes has generated me a character which I'm looking at from all different angles there. So I'm moving the thing around so I can see it from different angles, just to show that this character is 3D. It's not just a 2D animation. And so I can download this and drop it into a game engine or Unity or whatever, or some of those virtual environments, and maybe even use it as an avatar for myself. And that's all from just a little bit of text. And so this is early days for this stuff, but this is for prototyping or some of the things I used to build back in 2009. It was awfully difficult, ridiculously difficult to get the characters I needed for this hospital we were building. And if I could have just generated some mannequins to drop in and explain to the designer that what I would like those characters to look like, so they can make proper ones, then that works. Then that's awesome. But obviously some of them are going to get really good. So it's going to be interesting. Just like the GenAI words impact people that write for a living, and just like the images impact people that create images for a living, this stuff is now impacting 3D modelers and 3D texture artists and 3D riggers and animation specialists. Huge impact, and you can see that that's going to be quite challenging for the industry. And if it'll let me just get off this particular one. So this, say, it's there. You can go and have a look at it, and you know, away you go. But also, while I was doing this, last week, I think, when I was at another event, this got released. So 3D GPT. Now, it's not by OpenAI, but they've used the GPT thing, because everyone does. And this is some students from Australia, Oxford, and Beijing working together. So global collaboration, which is fantastic. And this is 3D scene generation. So I didn't record the video for this, but on the website for this, which is I'll just Google 3D GPT, and the code is there if you want to run it. This generates entire worlds or scenery. So there are, you know, here's a forest and some trees, and here's a desert, and here's something snowy. Exactly the same as I just showed you with the character, but it's generating space. And in, you know, notionally they're the same thing, but obviously the AI has to understand a little bit different about what those things are. And there are things in games that help you generate trees, like Speed Tree and stuff like that. But to be able to just describe a serene lake with glassy mirrored lake and cloudless sky reflecting, all those things, to be able to do that is and end up with that environment is intriguing. And it changes what those user-generated environments are in these virtual worlds. So the stuff I showed you in Second Life back in 2006, we ended up, you know, we had an island, we had some space, and it was green and flat, and you can make it go up and down on the ground. And you populated it with clip art or built your own things. But if we could just turn up and say, today we want this to look like the desert, and we want the Sphinx over there, and we want the pyramid over there, and then the next day we want to say, well, we want this to look like the polar ice cap. That's going to be really interesting for how we engage and talk to one another. So if I have a work meeting and I say, well, I want to theme this like the product I'm going to talk about, or the thing I'm going to talk about, or the subject, then you can engage the audience better, and you're all in that environment rather than just looking at my PowerPoint. And that's where we're kind of heading with this stuff. And also, just hot off the presses, today, so just before we came online for this, I saw an email that Stability.ai, who are the creators of Stable Diffusion, that I spelt incorrectly earlier on, an open source large language model and set of AI tools that you can run on any machine. You don't have to run them on the cloud. You don't have to give anyone your data. You can run your own version of that. You said that, and they're only a year and a bit old since they've released that. They've now got a private preview of Stable 3D. So Stability Diffusion is large language model like Chat-GPT, but for images like Midjourney. So it does they do all kinds of stuff. But now their blog post on this says we can generate 3D objects. And all these models, as it said down the bottom there, were created from text prompts and generated in a few hours. So these are, you know, those aren't animating in the fact they're not rigged like the masterpiece ones were, but they are highly detailed models. I think you can see there, and they're behaving as a physical item. That's why they bounce off one another. But that's going to be interesting to see what we can do with that when that comes out of this kind of private space, because you can just then drop them into Blender to animate them, or you can put them into Unreal or Unity and just use those in the same way that you can just use pictures and drop them into PowerPoint. So yeah, excited about that. And then just another bit of AI, because this isn't large language models, and this is another company called Virtual Beings, and they're in beta 2, so this is early days again, but I saw them talk the other day, and what they do and have been working to for the past decade, so they've been in this a while, is not large language models responding with text like the be the Mad Hatter or be Snoop Dogg as a dungeon master, but it's local AI. So wherever you're running it, so it's on your machine, it's a tiny little, a relatively small AI model that is trained with the behavior of the 3D object that you've got. So in this case, this example, and I played a video, is a behavioral model to make the 3D object of a bird act like a bird. So this isn't a bunch of pre-canned animations. This is taking, I mean, it'll be rigged, so you kind of know what wings are and what legs are and how it could move, but it's responsive to the things around it instantly. So when it sees, it's chirping and doing that, and then when its mate comes by, it stops and chirps at it, and then that flies away. They're then two AI characters interacting with one another, and this level of behavioral stuff, and you fuse that also with the large language model for things talking, you're getting a whole new level of life in characters that are going to be in virtual environments. I mean, that bird flew off into the distance. I mean, it doesn't have to be in Second Life or Roblox or whatever, but it's going to be. These things are going to be in these environments, and they're going to be in the games that we play, and they're going to be, but also we're going to be able to make them, because we're going to be able to specify the way these things behave. And they don't have to just be birds and dogs and cats, they can be people as well. We've all got you've got the backstory and in-world, but then you've got what happens if you stand too close to somebody? Are they going to step backwards? Or what happens if you go to shake your hand? Are they going to reach out and shake the hand? Or are they going to blank you? Those kind of things are going to be important changes to the more scripted versions of NPCs that we have at the moment. Now, also the kind of big dog in the room, which is Roblox, is also adding AI. So Roblox is a development platform as much as a platform to play on. And on the left there, you see typical Roblox avatar has been blocky. They were, they've been around a while, but it's they went for a more junior audience, and they were going for simpler avatars. But now you can drop a photo in, and this is their CTO showing their generative AI to say, well, make me from that blocky thing to make it look like me, and take me. I don't want to be a spaceman. I want to have a suit, or I want to look like a comic book style biker, he says there. So there he is with the leather jacket, like I had my leather jacket back in 2006. Now, don't expect you to read all the stuff on the right. I've just cut and pasted it from their blog. But if you go and look at Roblox's blog about their AI, they are putting tools in to help you, for an AI to help you learn the platform. So an assistant to help you write code and put the things that Roblox needs in the objects. So if you've got a car and it steers and accelerates, and and you go over a start finish line and get points, all those kind of things, that somebody needs to write that code. And then also building tools, as say, make a forest with different kinds of trees, now add some bushes and flowers. So excuse me. So exactly the same as I just showed on the 3D GPT, and what Stability is likely to be doing as well, or Stable Fusion. But this is in a commercial and very popular environment. So it's in there. And I think today as well, Microsoft's Copilot has gone live for lots of enterprises, which is these kind of things to help businesses when they're using Office 365 and stuff like that, and writing code and all those kind of things. So AI is injecting itself into all the things we do, but in this case, in the case of Roblox, that's a prime example of all the things we just showed, but they're doing it. Where they're sourcing it from, whether they're building it themselves, doesn't matter. It's just there, and kids that are building stuff are just going to love it and just get on with it and not think it's any different. Those of us that are not used to it might look at it and go, wow, that's clever. And then there'll be a load of people that go, I don't want to go near that, that's scary. We can forget about them. For now, they're going to have to come along with us on this ride, because this is definitely happening. And so, kind of coming to a close here. Yes, sorry, I just saw there was a chat. Apologies for that. I didn't see the question before. So yes, Unity is developing AI tools. Eric's just said to do similar and create environments. And yes, so all the things I've shown, whilst there are individual things and examples of that, development tools like Unity and Unreal, which are major tool platforms, and even the open source ones like Godot, they are in this too. So they're not standing by waiting. So they are putting AI things in. There are things in Unreal to help things learn to animate themselves. So rather than doing motion capture for how something walks or how something moves, where somebody actually walks around with a big bubble suit on and you record what it is and then turn it into animation, there are tools to help it. You put the arms and legs on something and then ask it to go and learn to walk and learn to navigate and learn to fight and learn to jump. And it just goes off and does it. And then NVIDIA has done some stuff that has taught some avatars how to play tennis by watching tennis. So it's just watched hours and hours and hours and hours of tennis videos. So we're back to tennis again. And then the characters and the AI has said, well, yeah, that's how people step and that's how people swing. And they didn't tell it how tennis worked. It learned tennis. And now you have a virtual tennis player powered by AI that you could drop into. You can drop into a game or drop into some TV stuff or whatever. And so all this stuff, wherever you look, you'll find interesting examples of where this stuff's influencing things. Now, some of it's just deep papers on things, but as I've shown you, some of these things are just URL, just a click away, and you can kind of engage with it. And there's a whole load of other, the list of applications that for AI in games and hence in metaverse and all these things is like everywhere else, quite almost endless. But things like not necessarily just the NPCs, not non-player characters, but the actual environment, not even the physical environment, but the story that you're engaged with. If lots of games and experiences about the narrative, that's why, whether we're making our own stories or being told a story to be part of, it's what does it feel like, what happened, who's the hero, who's the villain, all that kind of stuff. And that's, like when you watch a movie, when you read a book, they're all the tropes that we use. And so in an environment like a game or in a virtual world, the entire place around you adjusting to the narrative to fit what your experience needs to be and optimizing it for you or meeting your preferences is all going to be powered by, under the covers, by some AI tricks and tweaks. And it already is. We already have games that adjust to your skill level and put more stuff in if you're doing really well and just try and keep you at that kind of optimum. They're quite there's some quite clever ways of doing that, but this is just going to become more basic or more obvious way of doing this stuff with some of these tools. And then as a kind of that emergent animations and behavior, the things that learn to be things that I think there was a robot recently that trained it. They asked an AI to make a robot that can move around in a virtual environment, and it didn't do arms and legs. It did a sort of rolling blob, which could be made. It was sort of a thing that could be manufactured because it was a simulation of a proper thing, but it just took a different twist. And I think we'll see some of that. And there are already examples with bunches of AI townspeople and stuff that interact with one another and that people aren't involved in at all. And these things are arranging barbecues and parties and stuff for one another. And it's intriguing voyeurism to watch those. Things like training esports players. Esports is still a big gig, but if you want to beat your opponent and something can pretend to be as close to your opponent and do the unexpected things, but in the style of your opponent, then you can train against them. It's not just training against a random white label AI or just the gamers AI. So I actually want to play against this person or this team. The AI can see that team is more attacking or more defensive, or one person hides over there. All those kind of things will kind of, not just esports, but any sports that can potentially apply to. And then there's the kind of important thing, the really important things like special effect do, which is adaptive systems for different abilities. So an environment or a thing, whatever application it is, game, virtual world, office application, whatever, being able to adjust to you as a person so that you can get the most from it, rather like training esports players. But if you have a particular disability or inability to do something, or you can't hear it properly or see it properly, whatever, those things, knowing that about you, whatever, or you're just not, not quick enough for it, or you want it to go quicker, all those adjustments to us as people is going to be interesting to see the AIs in there. So it's not just about, I mean, the generating content and stuff is a huge thing in its own right, the stuff we've just talked about, but there's so many other little bells and whistles in this whole GenAI thing, or it's not just GenAI, in AI in general, in these things that are going to benefit from these huge advances that we've had the past few months. So we're nearly at the end here. So what I do want to leave us with, though, is that, and I know this is, I don't want to be too preachy here, but there's this sort of dystopian thing that people are going to be put out of jobs by AI and robots taking the jobs and all this stuff, and we know that that's going to happen because companies and profit and shareholders and stuff force companies to do things and try and cut costs and cut corners. Now, for gaming and for metaverse and the things that we're doing, I think the creativity and human engagement is about enjoyment. So whilst I was talking about factories and stuff like that, that's one thing, but games and experiences and socializing and stuff should be about us and not a formulaic thing. Gaming's a $200 billion industry, so there's a lot of big money in that, but it shouldn't change to a text prompt formula. It shouldn't be, oh, you can make a load of money because you've just typed a sentence in. There needs to be a little bit more effort. So just ask an AI, create me another version of Space Invaders, but with llamas in it or something. Not llamas, because Jeff Minton would do that. With cows and flying donkeys or whatever. That, yes, it'll do that. And yes, it's an interesting expression, rather like the creating lots of images in Midjourney and stuff like that. But it should be there as a prompt to try and make something even better. And all new genres and ideas come from those kind of experiments that we have, not just from a fire and forget. And I know companies are going to do it, guaranteed they're going to do it, and they're going to try and lay people off and do it as cheaply as possible. But I think we need to treat these as tools that let us experiment and explore and fill the skill gaps that the things that we don't have. I can now start to make a movie because I've written the book. Anyone can write a book. Anyone can make a movie, possibly, but they're all skills that you may or may not have in certain amounts, or a story to tell and stuff. And I want to see us using those things. And really, I mean, I think, there's a big kind of cool moment at the bottom there. There's never been a better time to go and create new things, because whatever you're thinking, if you think, well, I don't know what to do. I mean, you can start and ask Chat-GPT, so I haven't got any ideas, but I quite like swimming. What should I do? And it might come up with some ideas, and then you sort of build some stuff off that, or you generate some pictures just to get your mental model of something going and get the creative juices flowing, or you start making 3D objects in a virtual environment because you've got some friends coming over into your metaverse thing, and then you go, oh, actually, this would be really good, and before you know it, you've got some fancy nightclub for everyone to come to. So I hope you all go and explore and go and build some stuff, and always happy to talk and riff on this stuff. And so with that, I would like to say thank you, and I am open to any questions. I did take one in the middle of that because I happened to notice the chat window, but thank you very much for listening to me blather on about the metaverse and generative AI.